Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Hey/X/, I'm a cable guy. I sometimes find myself in some creepy places, both urban and rural. A particularly memorable experience would be getting lost in an underground maze of maintenance tunnels beneath several slummy apartment complexes. Detritus littered the floors, light was piss-poor at best, and no joke. Someone spray-painted "No Eyes Always Watches" all over a wall that looked out of place with the rest of the environment. It was like this freshly built cinder block wall that couldn't be more than a year old, looking pristine compared to the rest of the tunnels. My jimmies were rustled. Could swear I heard strange, high-pitched noises coming from behind the wall. I rationalized it as old machinery, but still, just felt like sharing. I tend to see weird things from time to time. Any other service personnel got similar stories? All right, how about the time I found myself in what was formerly an old school in the downtown, poor part of the city that had recently been renovated into a community center and an apartment. The building was built sometime in the early 1900s and had two primary sections: a single-story area that housed the cafeteria, gym, and other larger meeting rooms, and a three-story section that housed more standardized classrooms. I suspect it was an addition around the mid-40s. Fast forward into the 80s, and the school was shut down and left abandoned for several years, before a revitalization project in the 2000s led to it being restored as a community center and as an apartment complex. The three-story section where the apartments were located is where our story takes place. This was in the early months of my job, and I was riding with an experienced technician who has been with the company for 9 years. He primarily handled calls for businesses and large-scale residential housing, apartments and such, hence our heading out to this location. As it turns out, the apartments had no tenants yet. The renovation had only been completed 2 weeks prior, and not a single living soul inhabited the entire structure. Only one person had access. The property manager, a middle-aged woman who seemed normal enough, certainly didn't strike me as crazy when we met with her outside the building. The work order of the day stated that the apartment's internet was constantly dropping in and out at various but consistent times of the day. This was all re-explained to us by the manager as she led us through several security doors that required key cards to open. Clearly, only those with the cards could enter the building, and since there were no tenants, the only person in this city with a card was the property manager. As it were, she, myself, and the other tech were the only 3 people in that building when this story took place. So she walks us towards a stairwell in the back of the building. It leads down to a sub-level basement, and this is where the jimmies started to rustle. The upper floors were all pristine, welcoming, and generally appealing. But that descent, that sub-level was freaky, and this was before anything even happened. As you descended the final flight of steps, the railing and the paint began to rust and flake. By the time you hit the bottom floor, it was like you had just traveled back in time 80 years, complete with all the wear, tear, and decay you would expect. Concrete slab floors, faded paint that was covered in smears of unidentifiable liquid, long abandoned classrooms with creepy children's drawings of distorted animals and people. Seriously, it was disturbing. Just imagine any of the old schools in Pripyat, abandoned, empty, but with art and drawings decaying on the walls. And the worst part was that the floors were not even. I don't mean little dips and bumps, I mean no 2 rooms were on the same level. When you stepped off the stairway, you were on a short 15-foot hallway. To your left was a shallow 5-foot ramp that dropped down about 2 feet and led to a series of rooms. And to your right was 2 steps, just 2 steps, leading up into a slightly elevated classroom with a tiny window in the corner, caked in dirt, casting a dull brown light throughout that room. The ramped area didn't even have lighting, it was just pitch black. As me and the other tech explored the area trying to find the building's modem, we pulled out our flashlights, and I noticed that the further into the darkness we went, the more the light from our LED lanterns seemed to be absorbed by the blackness. There was a point where I could hold my hand directly in front of my light, and my hand wouldn't even be visible. I attributed this to mind games, but it still spooked me and the other tech. And it didn't help that each room you either had to climb several steps or stumble down a short ramp. Eventually, we managed to find a single lit room on the far end of the dark series of ramp rooms that had the building's utilities, including our cable taps. We discovered that the modem's AC adapter was precariously loose from its socket, so we reseated it and secured it by zip tying it to the sockets. As we were returning through the dark rooms, I got this weird feeling. Can't really describe what it was, but it made me want to move my ass and get on out of there. Can't quite put my finger on what it was, but I wanted to leave the underground ASAP. We took a wrong turn at some point and actually ended up in a dead end, and due to the strange effects the black was having on our LEDs, it took a while to find our way back to the stairwell. And I shit you not, there was a toilet, a goddamn porcelain throne, just sitting there by the two-step room. It was not there before, I can guarantee it, and the other tech swears up and down that he didn't see it on our way down either. At no point in our search of the downstairs did we discover a toilet, and I can also guarantee we were the only two people on that floor, because the door leading to that stairwell emits a loud series of beeps audible from any point on either the basement or the ground floor hallway. That was the point when we silently looked at each other, and then bounded up the stairs as fast as we could. Nope.jpg. So we get to the office and we're talking to the manager, explaining to this lady about what was going on with the loose outlet and completely neglecting to mention any of the strange occurrences going on downstairs. She seems satisfied with our work, and as we're grabbing our gear and preparing to leave, I kind of offhandedly say, "It sure is kind of spooky down there, eh?" And the manager just casually replies, "Yeah, this building is haunted." What the hell, lady? The other tech and I just kind of glance at each other, and I can see his face paling. Mine probably was too. We look back to her. She proceeds to explain the history of the building, how it used to be an old school for disenfranchised children, and had a lot of violent students from the rough surrounding neighborhoods. She said that every day around either 10 a.m. or 1 p.m., she would hear the sounds of chairs scooting across the second-floor rooms, where most of the classrooms for younger students were located. She's speaking as nonchalantly as can be about all this, like it's just part of the workday. A woman, completely alone in a building, just casually mentioning that she hears non-existent furniture scooting around upstairs, a building which I can confirm had no furniture in it at the time to generate such phantom chair scoots. As she keeps explaining some of the other phenomena to us, my hairs start to stand on end. It was like my fight or flight was kicking in, because I really wasn't enjoying being in this place anymore. She told us how her boss was always calling her crazy about the stories, right up until she invited him and some other executives over for a meeting in her office one day, right around noon. During that meeting, the scoots occurred, and nobody ever gave her crap about it again, nor did they ever come hold meetings at her property. The other tech tried to rationalize it as being some kind of pipework or ventilation in the ceiling, and she just kind of shrugs, grabs a broom in the corner, and pokes out some of the faux removable ceiling tiles. Ain't jack up there, naught but for a single water pipe and a single ventilation duct. At this point, the other tech reins the conversation back in and starts to discuss the specifics of her service. I'm still staring up at the ceiling, the hairs on my neck standing straight up, and then a nearby church started ringing its bells to signify the change of the hour. And then we heard it. No, it wasn't Fresh Prince, no, it wasn't open the door, get on the floor. It was a sound you heard every day in school for years, the sounds of students excitedly getting up and pushing their desks and chairs as they were rushing out the door for a class change. It was as clear to the ears as these words are to your eyes. It sounded slightly off, though, like the actual source of the audio was several feet above where the floor of the second floor was. Myself and the other tech, if we weren't pale enough before, went ghostly white. Even the lady got quiet and just kind of looked up at the ceiling. The sound subsided after a minute. I walked right out of her office, up the stairs to the second floor, and proceeded to look into every single room. There was not a single person, nor was there a single piece of furniture in any of those rooms. None of the 8 units had anything whatsoever in them that could have caused what we heard that day. I just walked back to the office, politely thanked the lady for calling us, asked where the other tech had gone, found out he had left immediately after I had, and met up with him outside. We left for our next job and haven't spoken about the experience at all since. Well, maybe he hasn't. A few days later, I was relaying my experiences to another technician. and after I was finished, he asked me whereabouts this building was. After I relayed the general vicinity of its location, his eyes widened up and he told me that he had gone to that school in one of its last years in operation and that the place had been haunted back then. Students would report strange sights and feelings of unease down in the basements, and many of the grades of students who took classes on the second floor would deteriorate over the course of the semester. But that could easily be poor kids not giving a damn about math. You know how kids these days are. But to hear that over 30 years ago, people were having unexplainable experiences in that building certainly was an exciting find. It helped me justify that I wasn't crazy or overreacting, that the possibility that something paranormal may very well have been occurring in that building. From an objective standpoint, it could very well have simply been mind games and faulty ductwork. After all, the building had just had the upper levels freshly renovated, so everything was brand new and still in the breaking-in stages of operation use. But I'll be damned if the sounds of chairs and desks scooting weren't coming from the whole goddamn second floor. And I still can't explain the light being seemingly absorbed by the blackness, especially with high-power LED lanterns. Maybe an Anon knows more about LEDs and zero visibility conditions than I do. But yeah, I thought that was a fun little adventure, and it certainly rustled the hell out of my jimmies at the time. I'm hoping to someday get another job at that location so that I can sneak a camera in and get some pictures of the creepy sub-levels. Probably won't happen for a long time, though. Hope this was a satisfactory read for y'all. I'm not the best storyteller.
Work as a cable installer. Spooky old 3-story house. Only resident is a little old lady in a wheelchair. Elevator installed because of the wheelchair. She's gone all day with doctor's appointments. Elevator keeps dinging and going back and forth between floors at random intervals. Tool bag keeps disappearing every time I turn my back. Reappears in random rooms. Go down to the basement. Have to drill through a 1-foot thick brick wall to run the cable from one side to the other. Partner goes to the other side of the wall. Drill hole. Insert 3-foot long neon plastic rod so he can see hole. He doesn't see it. Go around to his side and fail to see the rod. Come back. Drill a different hole. Figuring maybe one side of the basement is at a different elevation or whatever bullshit we could rationalize it with. Insert rod. He still doesn't see it. I wiggle rod back and forth. Nothing. Go to his side again. Drill a hole from his side. Insert a rod and go back to my side. No rod poking out of the wall. Screw it. I'll use the biggest drill bit I've got. Reach for the tool bag. It's absconded to the living room again. Retrieve it, get a 4-foot drill bit, and run it up to the hilt into that wall. Pull drill out. Bit is melted off 6 inches from the drill. What in the ever-living hell is going on here? Old lady comes back. Explain difficulties to the old lady. She grabs an old phone book off the kitchen counter, throws it at a random wall, and shouts for someone to leave these nice men alone and let them work. You shouldn't have any more trouble, dearie. Go down to the basement and drill the hole again. Partner sees the rod instantly and we push the cable through, finish install and leave. Both of us refuse to ever do a maintenance call to that house.
I work maintenance at a venue that hosts many different events. The building is well over 3,000 square feet, 4 stories tall, and sits alone on 300 acres. The main building dates back to the early 1900s. A large addition was built in the mid-90s, and crude tombstones and bones were uncovered during excavation. Prius-driving pajama boys always tell me the place is scary. K think. Co-workers and I joke about the anonymous venue name Ghost being responsible for the weird. Goings-on around the place after the owners said they have seen apparitions in the building. In all seriousness, I've seen numerous shadow people in the basement running in my peripheral vision. But that isn't conclusive evidence of a ghost. Anyway, events usually run late. Sometimes I'm on the clock until 2 a.m. Around 1 a.m. one night, I'm in the basement service hallway shutting off lights after the guests have gone. I am alone on the entire floor. I moved into the basement kitchen to shut off the lights in there. As I step through the doorway, a water glass flies horizontally off a shelf across the room and smashes, with pieces hitting my shoes. The shattering glass in the dead silence initially startled me more than the odd way the glass fell. The floor is solid concrete. The shelves are metal, bolted to the floor, and they even have a lip on the edge to keep things from falling off. How did that happen? I stood there in disbelief for a second, then cleaned up the glass. As I thought about it, the glass looked like it was swatted and tossed off of the shelf. I mean, there's no way it could have slid off. I realized how badass it was to have a glass thrown at you, presumably by a spooky specter, and I happily noped upstairs to go tell the other guys on my shift what happened. I haven't ever felt threatened by the ghost, but I do get the feeling I'm being watched sometimes, which makes me nervous. I certainly welcome any playful paranormal activity because it makes for good ghost stories.
So, to begin, this story happened back in 2018. I arrived in this small, rural town near Cape May, New Jersey. The company I was working for at the time was sending me out to go door to door, advertising cable and Wi-Fi that they wanted me to sell. I was getting weird vibes all throughout the day, as the town itself was very small and a bit creepy, with people staring at me or giving me the cold shoulder for the entire day. It seemed like a lot of the townsfolk that I encountered that day were on edge, and it was a weird tense atmosphere that I shrugged off, as people are weird all the time. I continued doing my job, chugging a Red Bull to keep me going, which didn't affect me at all surprisingly. Besides the weird atmosphere, the scenery was actually quite pretty once you got off the main road. I had to stop at different streets, and some were in the woods on long and seemingly beautiful endless roads. It was quite scenic. Just before sunset, I was scheduled to visit a few houses on a small peninsula. To get to this peninsula you had to go down a very long road, past a summer camp area, past a trailer park, past the woods, and then you finally find yourself in a small open area with a bay marsh, a couple small expensive houses, and shore access. The houses were so close to the water it seemed to be a code violation, but I'm sure they were built to withstand storms since they looked so expensive. Every house had its own theme, and the area was mostly deserted. Only one house had someone inside, whom I had talked to after knocking on his door. I was so distracted looking at the houses and scenery that I didn't notice how fast sunset was approaching. I came to the realization that I should start heading back, to avoid being alone on that long deserted pathway in the woods. As a smaller female, I'm never comfortable after dark in isolated places, especially without cell service. I was making my way down the path, so far so good, as it wasn't completely dark yet. As I approached the wooded area of the road, I was walking a bit faster, since there were no street lights and the sunlight was rapidly disappearing. As I walked at a decently fast pace, I noticed something. The woods were eerily quiet. All the life that I was hearing before was gone. No crickets, no birds, just pure silence. I stopped in my tracks and got chills down my spine as I felt the feeling that I was being watched. I looked around the dark woods for any sudden movements and then, like clockwork, something up ahead made its way out of the tree line. It looked to be some type of large animal. My brain went into overdrive analyzing whatever this animal was. Was it a bear? A dog? No. It looked like a large dog. But dogs don't get this big. Though I was intimidated by its large size, whatever it was hadn't noticed me. Even though I was scared, I also didn't want to walk back and go into that one man's house. As a woman, would rather take my chances with a wild animal than be alone with a man I don't know in a deserted holiday neighborhood. Suddenly, as I was thinking this, the large animal in the distance finally noticed my presence. It was observing me, not entirely sure of what to do with me. There wasn't enough light anymore for me to see the animal's face, but I felt unusually frightened. Whatever I was looking at was definitely too big to be a black bear, with a shoulder height of at least 5 feet on all fours, which is comparable in size to a brown bear. The mass of this creature was extensive, as the outline of what I could see looked like a wolf on steroids. It was very muscular. I also noticed that the outline of its face was very similar to that of a German shepherd or a wolf, as it had perked ears and a long snout. In the heat of the moment, I could only hear the sound of my heart palpitating as fear and adrenaline started to crawl their way into my bloodstream. It felt as if time stood still, and then it dawned on me. What I was looking at wasn't a normal animal, and it was simply too big to be any animal that I could recognize from New Jersey's catalog of fauna. And, if it wanted to attack me, I would be powerless against it. It was simply too big. Though, to calm myself down, I threw out the idea that this creature was out of the ordinary because I felt like this could be rationalized somehow. I made my brain go back to the idea of this being maybe a large dog or coyote. I also did not believe in cryptids and was completely unaware of what size coyotes are supposed to be, so I made a quick decision. Realizing that this could very well be a life or death situation, I came to the conclusion that this very large dog-like creature was probably a skittish coyote that I could scare off, at least temporarily, to calm down my nerves. What other choice did I have? The longer I kept standing there, the more aggressive I might come across to this animal, and I didn't want it to get territorial or get the idea that I was easy prey. So, I decided I would make the most hideous, loud, confusing, and startling scream/howl I could muster and just sprint the rest of the way. After I screeched this hideous sound out of my body as hard as I could, the animal quickly changed its body language to defensive, but then it quickly changed its mind to deciding I wasn't worth a fight as it ran a decent distance into the woods, not too far though. I decided to sprint as fast as I could past that area and beyond. I sprinted until I reached the end of the road, and noticed there was a summer camp area with street lights near me. I rested on top of a table there, out of breath and feeling my heart pound out of my chest. However, I was still very shaken up and still felt like I was being watched. I kept my eyes on the tree line. My eyes were darting around, looking for any sign this animal was still there. Once I felt like the coast was clear, I located the next house I was scheduled to visit, and I quickly made my way over. I met a nice family who ended up buying cable from me, and I told them what had happened to me that night and how I was treated by the locals. The lady of the family, who I presumed to be the mother, said, "I don't know why they sent you out here alone. These woods are dangerous after dark, and there are creepy people who live around here." The impression she was giving me was that there were animal encounters she couldn't explain and that there were lots of ex-convicts in the area, and people who should have been arrested but haven't been. She was equally concerned about the people as she was about the animals around this place. This gave me goosebumps. How many times today could my life have been taken? They were extremely concerned for my safety and told me to contact my team leader so I could get picked up. They said they didn't want me to go outside again and that I should call it quits for the night and not make it to any other houses. To this day, I still have no idea what creature I had encountered. There are strange things in the woods, things people don't speak about or cover up. I felt like the townsfolk of that town knew something about what I encountered.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.